And Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley is coming up next. So it was ultimately the tag titles that they went with. And I think they got things right. And I cannot imagine these two being upset after this event.
It helped them. It helped these two because one of the unfortunate things is if they were to main event, I think it would have built a lot of bitterness from the audience, and it would have started these two off who are already handicapped enough given their lack, I guess questionable build. It would have handicapped them even more to have the audience feel like they took the main event slot away from Owens and Zayn and the Usos. So I completely think it helped them.
Yeah, to me, it would be like, I would just want to go out there and have the match that everyone is talking about. And yeah, that was always like the thing that really like struck CM Punk was the 10 years ago at the WrestleMania with The Undertaker. And that, like they did not get the main event slot, but by everyone's recognition, it was the match of the show that everyone was raving about. It's like, dude, I'll take that over closing the show. But there is obviously something inherent in closing the show that is a validation for a lot of these performers. But I would much rather take the match that, but unfortunately, this was a show that was pretty loaded. I don't know if this was everyone's match of the show, but it could be. It certainly could have been.
And I don't know if I was expecting that type of conversation. I was expecting maybe the conversation of asking whether or not this should have main evented, but I was not expecting this match to have Owens and Zayn and the Usos to ask Owens and Zayn and the Usos if they could follow this match. I was not expecting this match to be this good.
I was not expecting this match to be this good. Even like 10 minutes into it, I don't know if I was in the minority, but like the first 10 minutes of this, I just felt like there was a lot of, it just seemed like they were off with one another. The timing just didn't seem to be jiving. I think the audience was somewhat like they wanted to be behind Ripley, but Flair was not fully the heel or the baby face. And there was just a lot of clunkiness. And then it was once like the midway point of this match, it was like a series of like the suplexes and obviously the crazy one with Flair. And then boom, like this audience went to another level, and the work, like they were just on fire with one another. And it was like the last 12 minutes of this turned into like a classic WrestleMania match. But I will say, like the beginning half of this, like I was thinking like this is not going well for me at least, but a gigantic turn like by the midway point here. And I think some of it was the timing stuff, but I think also the audience really not knowing kind of where things are lined up here. Like you had Ripley kind of playing the babyface at points, even though she is, and then at other points playing the heel too, but they got into just the spirit of the match by the end. And it's just these two that who can withstand the other by the end. And it became this big battle.
So this was certainly my biggest question heading into this match was whether or not they would change heel babyface directions. I mean, given the type of promos that these two have been cutting before this match, I thought they were probably going to go straight with like a Rhea Ripley babyface type of thing with the Charlotte heel type of thing, especially when Miz made that announcement of the match at the beginning of the show and this crowd booed Charlotte. I thought they would lean into it even more. They had a pretty straight up Charlotte babyface match, and I don't think Rhea was like overtly heel, like she didn't cheat to my recollection or anything. But they certainly didn't make Charlotte a babyface either, or sorry, a heel either. And it was a successful match. I mean, this crowd was with Charlotte. I don't know if they necessarily wanted to see her win, but they certainly did boo her. And I think so much of that is because when you just see her wrestle, she is very impressive, especially on a big stage. And it's very hard to boo somebody who's this good.
I think there's also something to be said about where the current WWE audience makeup is, that I think we have to acknowledge that we are removed from maybe where we were 5-10 years ago. Like go back to that Roman Reigns Brock Lesnar match in New Orleans that we were at. And I'm not going to say like that kind of a scene couldn't happen today under the right circumstances, but I see it being a lot tougher. Like this is a crowd that I think they are not going to be so, in their minds, disrespectful to performers. Like had Charlotte and Rhea closed the show, it might not have been the most engaged crowd, but were they going to actively turn on the match, I don't think they would have. I don't think they would have. I think you have a crowd now that is much more, they are rooting for these people rather than they're going to be dismissive or protest against them. And I think that that's an evolution of this WWE audience when you're talking especially about a larger event like this.
I think you also have a much less antagonistic relationship between the company and the audience these days.
That's certainly true.
This is a company that seems to listen to the audience in the way they book. And I think we simply look at, the ascent of a Sami Zayn over the past year, maybe as some evidence of that. Whereas the Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns matches, I feel like a lot of that was like the crowd rebelling and telling the producers of the show, hey, we don't like this direction. We don't like always seeing this Roman Reigns character at the top of our cards. You might get that a whole lot less these days.
They also noted at the beginning that this is the first time in WrestleMania history that all the people involved in this match with obviously the two principals, but Jessica Carr, the referee, and Samantha Irvin, the ring announcer, all females. So noting that statistic. So again, the beginning here, I think they really had a time kind of finding things. There was a really cool spot where Rhea fairly early on goes for a riptide and it's countered into a DDT that I thought was the first impressive moment of the match. But they get things going. Flair goes for a moonsault and it's stopped when Ripley suplexes her overhead. And all these suplexes Charlotte took, she would rotate over to, in theory, land on her chest. Although for one, it would be kind of a tide change in the match. Flair goes for a spear, misses, and her shoulder runs into the steps. So Ripley capitalizes on this, goes for the riptide, but it's stopped as Flair hits a release German. And this is when Ripley goes for another suplex and turns Flair over, and she comes down on her face. And her neck is contorted, and she comes up and she's cut on the bridge of her nose. And they replayed this several times. And dude, this it was so little that Charlotte had room to change. And this was just a nasty looking suplex, but it really did. This had the feel of one of those Budokan Hall matches where it's the crazy spot that from that moment on, it's the intensity level is increased because of this crazy moment, and the audience all followed with this suplex onward. And for the remainder of this match, the near falls were intense, and this audience was treating this like this was the main event to them.
It was something special, just to see the type of activity, I suppose, in the match itself. Charlotte has, I guess, really good vertical leap, and I don't recall seeing her take these Germans like that before. This one looked incredibly risky, and I wonder if it came almost a little too close. But obviously it was safe enough by the end. But it sucked this crowd in for sure.
So we escalated significantly here. Flair delivered her moonsault to the floor, and then Flair almost runs into the ref with a spear, but it sets up the riptide after she stops to avoid hitting Jessica Carr. The riptide is hit, and Charlotte kicks out, and the place goes nuts. And Rhea Ripley, this is the time you go full Ruby Riot, and she hit 15 on the Ruby scale. She applies the prism lock. Flair fights to the rope, and man, she just struggled, and she's posting on her arms where they're trying to explain that it subdues some of the submission, and sends Rhea into the corner, spears her for a 2 count, and Flair is tearing up. She doesn't know if she has enough to beat Rhea Ripley, and she starts yelling, "You want my place? You want this?" And they get into this huge striking exchange, and the crowd is rabid for these strikes. Boot by Flair. She tries for the figure 8, but Ripley is against the rope, and Flair is driven face first into the post from the turnbuckle and goes limp as she's hung over the top turnbuckle. Ripley climbs, and we get a riptide off of the second turnbuckle, and she stacks Charlotte for the pin in 23 minutes and 34 seconds as Charlotte just rolls to the floor. Ripley celebrates, and we had the great contrast of Ripley, who is on top of the world celebrating, and then you have Charlotte dejected on the floor, but then you see her smiling almost as though she is proud of Rhea Ripley and getting this win 3 years later. This turned into a phenomenal match, and this might be some people's match of the show. I'd be very curious what the breakdown is, but this one, to be I was expecting a good match, a really good match. This heavily over delivered.
Yeah. So, this match, I think rightfully was in the same semi-main event position and not in the main event position. But by the end of it, they had people arguing that it should have been in the main event. And I think that's an incredible accomplishment. When you're comparing this story leading up to this match to the story of Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and the Usos, what a feat to have people having that conversation. And it, to me, like, the entire value of this was achieved in ring in these 15 minutes, John? Like, how long was
23?
23. And like, it felt considerably less because I thought it was very captivating. I think it's because Charlotte is a great big stage performer, and you had somebody in Rhea Ripley that is also incredibly capable and has been on fire as a character. And this crowd really wanted to see the title change. And Charlotte played a wonderful gatekeeper in story, as somebody who's refusing to let go, and Rhea Ripley fighting her heart out to get that spot. I was really surprised at how much this crowd was with the both of them. You had dueling chants, great reversals, no bells and whistles. I thought this was just a really good pro wrestling match.
Listen, this is a situation where it's like, listen, it's to me, this to me would be like your scenario that you've wanted to cultivate, where it's these two matches. They're like, you have main event players that are all vying for that position. And this is not about like gender. This is about two quality matches and each side wanting to go out there and unseat the other to be your match of the night. And tonight we got two matches here where they were going out to justify why they should be the main event or why they were given the main event slot. And you got, I thought, two unbelievable matches.
Do us a huge favor and subscribe to the channel so that you know when to come back tomorrow. If you're enjoying these types of podcasts, we go live every Monday night, every Wednesday night. And if you're a Post Wrestling Cafe patron or video.postwrestling.com patron as well, we go live on Fridays as well as numerous times throughout the week for all of you guys. So we'd love it if you can help out the channel. We're still trying to grow it. We're relatively small by, pro wrestling YouTube standards. So help us get up there, subscribe.
Yeah, we're trying to get up there to the heavyweights, like cold as balls.
What's that?
That's Kevin Hart's podcast that they were promoting. Logan Paul was on this week.
Okay.
Cold as balls.
I'm glad I asked for that context because
yes,
I guess I could have just left it.
We will also mention for Post Wrestling Cafe members as well, and we appreciate all the people that have jumped on, new subscribers this week. We will be putting out a show this week where we are going to go back and we are going to discuss heavily the infamous CM Punk appearance on The Art of Wrestling in November of 2014. We're going to re-listen to the first. There were actually back-to-back weeks. The first week, which is the sizable one, and look at it 9 years later, almost 9 years later. So that will be coming up. PostWrestlingCafe.com, $6 gets you in the door. Tons of bonus shows. We had a lot of great interviews up on the site this week with Brandon Thurston, Dave Meltzer, Speedball Mike Bailey that are there in their entirety from this past week, and it helps support the site as well. So you can check that out, postwrestlingcafe.com.